Beth, like I say, 7 allied nations, but politically big gulfs between them on many subjects, especially at the moment. What's going to top the agenda, and where will they find consensus, if any at all?
All good questions and all difficult questions to answer. But look, where we're kicking off here now for our Prime Minister is in Ottawa, and you've seen he's just gone in to have a bilateral meeting with Mark Carney, the former Bank of England governor. So lots of you back home will recognise him. He's now the Canadian Prime Minister, and that pair, they've known each other for a long time. They're both in progressive Liberal parties, so they're both politically quite aligned, and they're in there to talk about trade between our two countries. There was a prospective bilateral trade deal to be discussed between the UK and Canada, but that was pulled by the Conservative government in 2024. So are they going to reignite those talks? It might be that there's some words on that coming out of this bilateral meeting. They're also both in a Trans-Pacific partnership. That's a dozen countries. It's called the CPTPP, and I had to write that down because I always get it wrong. But they're in that trading partnership as well, and it might be that we're also going to see the Canadians ratify the UK's entry to that trading bloc, and that might also loosen up trade. Look, it matters to the UK because we do about £28 billion of trade with Canada. It's not small beer. The Prime Minister here to try and build that. So that's what they're talking about. But look, there's two other massive things on the agenda. Point one on the Middle East. Both these leaders have talked about de-escalation. You heard the Prime Minister talk about that. But meanwhile, we are moving military assets. We're moving fighter jets to the region. And overnight, the UK government are now advising British nationals to not travel to Israel. So that's new. I asked the Prime Minister's deputy spokesperson in a briefing we had earlier here in Ottawa about whether or not there are plans to actually take British citizens out of the region, take them out of Israel and bring them home. There are some reports of that. He wouldn't comment. He just said we're monitoring the situation. The point of all of it, it's very fast moving. So that will no doubt be on the agenda for these two gentlemen as well. What's happening in the Middle East between Iran and Israel, and de-escalation. But then I think there's something else as well, which you touched on at the top of the question, and that is, how does this G7 go when there's 6 countries pretty much aligned, and then there is the US pursuing an American first, more isolationist policy? How do they try and bring the US back in? How do they try and persuade Donald Trump on Israel and Iran to talk up de-escalation, which I think he's yet to do, although I don't think the US have been involved in the attacks? How do they try and convince Trump to perhaps put some limits in on how Russia can sell the price it sells its oil? That's on the agenda here, in also to try and put a stranglehold on the finances of Putin's war machine. Can they get agreement on that? And I think, to be honest, the expectations going into this summit are low. Mark Carney has left controversial issues that might irritate Trump, such as climate change, off the agenda. There is talk that there will not be a communique. That's an official statement at the end where leaders set out what they've agreed in the roadmap to achieving them. There's an expectation that just won't happen because they simply cannot get Trump to agree. And I'll leave you with this thought. Back in 2018, when the G7 was last hosted in Canada, you might remember a picture that went viral. It was Angela Merkel, the then German Chancellor, leaning over a desk, basically looking like she was giving Trump a telling off. He was glowering, all the other leaders around him. That summit ended with Justin Trudeau, the then Canadian Prime Minister, saying that Canada would fight back on tariffs that Trump was putting on on aluminium and steel, and that ended with Trump leaving the summit and saying he would not sign the communique. It was extremely ill-tempered. Mark Carney is trying to avoid all of that, and in that room he is talking to a Prime Minister who himself says has a good relationship with Trump. So I imagine that they're also trying to game out how they manage this situation in order to try and get good outcomes in the areas of, say, Ukraine and Israel. But it is all so much up in the air, and really the conflict in the Middle East has really scrambled the agenda here as they talk here now in Ottawa, and then they head off to another venue in Canada, Kananaskis, in the mountains for the official summit.